Dining and driving are becoming luxuries for the average consumer here in Korea as prices of fruits, vegetables, and those at the pumps remain high. So how high has the cost of consumption surged? What is pushing up the price of fresh produce? And what are the prospects of price stability this year? Hello and welcome to Issues and Insiders. I'm Min Sun-hee. Today we start our daily panel session with live coverage of President Yoon Suk Yeol's opening remarks for the latest government checkup on the cost of living as grocery prices and fuel costs hover high. In fact, findings by Statistics Korea show price of fruits in February jumped over 40% on year. Now, this jump stands in sharp contrast to the 3.1% rise in the consumer price index last month. Pundits are blaming soaring fruit prices to poor harvests amid adverse weather conditions. Accordingly, relevant government authorities are seeking to take further action to ease the burden on consumers. Our live coverage of the President's opening address will be followed by a regular panel discussion on consumer prices here in the country. Do stay tuned.
We could hear the voices of the people on the ground, and there were a lot of voices that it's very difficult to cope with high prices, and I feel very grim about it. Last year, before Chuseok, I was visiting this place, the Hanaro Mart, where we are at today, and we have talked about the prices. And back then, the austerity measures of the countries around the world, and also the raw material prices that was soaring due to the Ukraine war, and other issues were there, and especially the inflation was at the 6% level, which was a very pressing situation. And ever since, the government and private sector came together and mustered our strengths, and we have worked very hard. And we are seeing recovery, signs of recovery, and export came into the black, and also the employment rate has seen the all-time high and 25 consecutive months high, which is the highest since it was first recorded in 1983. And also the prices are at about 3% level, and we expect this to be lower to 2% range, which will be quite low compared to other countries. However, the prices came up at 3.1%, meaning that the lowering trend has been staggering a little bit. And also the gasoline price has gone up, and also the vegetables and fruits, the fresh produce, the prices are soaring. In particular, the grocery prices are going high, which is directly affecting the livelihoods of the people. Last month, the price growth was 3.1%, which is relatively stable. However, when we look at the prices of the items that are directly linked to the livelihoods of the people, it's about 3.7%. So the government will do our best, and we are going to take measures immediately. First of all, until the fresh produce price is stabilized, regardless of the term and items, we are going to support these items so that the prices are stabilized. Especially for apples and pears, we are going to spare no effort to stabilize the prices. And also, the prices of strawberries and fruits will also be supported by the government. And also, the emergency agro farm produce and fishery products support measures, we are going to invest 150 billion Korean won. And also, we are going to give taxation support for processed foods and imported foods, and also the five items, including kiwi and cherries, they will be given favorable tax support. And also for other produces, the government will import them directly so that the prices are stabilized. And mangoes and bananas will be one of the items included in the ones that the government will support in terms of direct importing. And as mentioned earlier, we are going to increase the support for the unit prices so that these apples and pears and these fruit prices will be stabilized to the normal years, to previous normal years. And also, we are going to have a thorough inspection of the on-site places so that we know for sure that these policies are effective, and we are also going to check on any actions or any incidents of unfair trade. And as such, the government will do our utmost and will do an all-out support to stabilize the consumer prices. And as we do this at the government level, I ask all the people who are involved in this regard, especially the private sector, to join forces in terms of resolving this issue that are felt by the people. And I have been holding policy discussions with the people from January this year, and we have been talking about this subject very frequently. The consumer prices are the people's foremost concern and the most basic way to know the effectiveness of the policy. Our government is a government that takes actions. So let's put the consumer prices at the forefront so that we have our outcomes that are felt by the people. And what is most important is that if it's a policy that no one knows about, then this policy is something of no use. So we have to make sure that the policies that we're discussing today would be communicated to the people, and also we are going to implement these policies as soon as possible. Thank you.
Right, that was President Yoon Suk Yeol's opening remarks for the latest government meeting on stabilizing public livelihoods amid soaring prices of agricultural products and those at the pumps here in Korea. Now, for some broader perspective on the government's related efforts, I have Professor Yang Hee-dong at Ewha Womans University live on the line. Professor Yang, welcome back.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me.
I also have Professor Shim Myung-kyu at Yonsei University with us. Professor Shim, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me again, sir.
Right. Professor Yang, what is your takeaway from the President's latest remarks?
Well, first of all, I can tell that the government is pretty much strict over the price, the stability. As already know, the Korean government declared that they will keep the price level increase around 2%. And President Yoon has admitted that the core consumer price index that excludes the oil prices and agricultural products stays about 2.5, which is in the range of the government, the objective. But the problem for the recent, particularly the price increase in the last month, was triggered by the price increases in energy and agriculture products. So, well, Well, the fact that we had serious problems with those two items also have a positive aspect, because once we hold tight control of those two products, probably the Korean government can successfully maintain the price levels within their, the objective level.
Right, of 2% hopefully then. I had asked you about your assessment, speaking within your capacity as a scholar of consumer prices here in Korea, Professor Shim.
Okay, so what I said was that the target inflation of the BOK is 2%, and compared to the level, the current inflation rate is still above that. So we may need additional decrease in the inflation rate. And given that we have observed this similar patterns last year, that the inflation rate declined for several consecutive months and has kind of the lower bound and then raised again, implying that we cannot be sure if the downward trend, recent downward trend can be sustainable. And what I particularly worry is that food prices, as President Yoon also pointed out, especially food prices have skyrocketed very recently. This might push the overall prices again. So it seems that it would not be that easy to achieve the target inflation rate of the BOK very soon.
Right. Professor Yang, as Professor Shim has mentioned, prices of food, especially fruits and vegetables, have soared. What do you suppose are the main reasons behind this particular worrying trend?
Well, as President Yoon mentioned, there are a couple of reasons behind this abrupt increase in the agriculture, particularly the fresh fruits. Well, the fruits have increased in price by 41% YoY, which is the largest increase in the last 32 years. Apple increased by 71%, tangerine by 78%, pear by 61%, etc. Well, the major reason behind this increase was, again, the bad weathers. We had a very cold spring last year, and lots of rains and typhoons and summer heat last summer. We also had very bad damages from harmful insects as well. So these are, major triggers that combine to, skyrocketed the prices in the fresh fruit. The problem is we may not be able to overcome this problem until we have new harvest. So as President Yoon mentioned, there are maybe three major reactions to overcome this problem. The first one is probably can reduce the tariff for this imported fruits. And number two, we can diversify or increase the importing countries, such as to Japan, Germany, Argentina, Portugal, etc. And the third, probably the government can support a particular fund to support the discounts of the fruit prices. President, you mentioned about $150 million, even though newspapers mentioned about $60 million. But no matter what, absolutely, the Korean government may have to spend extra fund to support the discount in the fruit prices.
Right. So, Professor Yang, as you mentioned, while we wait for our next harvest, we probably have to open up the market, that is, the agricultural market, to more imports from overseas. Now, there has been quite a bit of debate regarding this particular effort. Where do you stand on the debate of, or concerns, that is, of being overly reliant on imports of agricultural produce?
Well, the Korea is one of the top 5 importers from the United States for the import. But you know what? This is not just a matter about the economy, but also the international politics are involved with this one. For example, I know that Portugal was very, very serious to export their pork to Korea, but it had a very long time until they get approval from Korean government. So, well, it's really hard to tell. But Korean government may feel some pressures from the American government to import this agricultural stuff, because every 4 year the United States have to a new election for the new president, and this is right here for them. So I don't think we may not be able to overcome the pressures from the American government, particularly from the current government, from President Biden, and also. Even though we may try to diversify the import countries, but it takes a lot of time because both of exporting and importing countries have to reinvestigate and renovate their quarantine process. I mean, this changes in the quarantine process takes a lot of time. It's not that easy and very simple snapping the matter. So for all these reasons, international political and the quarantine process, durations, it takes really time and almost very, very hard to diversify the import the partners for the agriculture and fruit stuff.
Right. Professor Shim, generally speaking, what have been some of the government's efforts thus far to ease price hikes generally, and how effective do you believe have they been?
I think the government has done what it should have implemented to fight against high inflation. First, the ministry planned to use about 70 billion won this year to lower food prices, which have surged a lot this year, as we have already discussed. Second, the government also tried to lower import tariff on several items, including food items, as is already discussed, so that supply of the goods can force the market prices to go down. And third, more recently, the government also tries its effort to force the markets to lower price tags, which can directly affect the price levels. Lastly, as it has attempted to keep the price levels in the public sectors as low as possible. So there have been a lot of attempts to keep the price level as low as possible, but I'm not too sure, although those policies are really important, I'm not sure about the effectiveness of such policies because forces behind the price hikes seem to be beyond the control of the government. Changes in the efficiency of supply chains after the COVID-19, prolonged wars in several regions like Ukraine, to accommodative monetary policies after the COVID-19 crisis, and climate change have all contributed to current high price levels. And given that they are kind of structural factors, I'm a little bit skeptical about the effectiveness of the policy measures that I just discussed.
Right, I see. And Professor Yang, moving forward, prices at the pumps, as I mentioned earlier, also a major concern for drivers here in Korea. How high are the fuel costs here in the country? And again, what countermeasures are in place and how effective have they been?
Well, this year, the West Texas Intermediate has increased over 13% in the last in a couple of months. So it could be a problem because a couple major problems behind this abrupt increase in oil price is the first, it make a rippling effect over all the other industrial products because, the oils have been the major resources, fuels for the manufacturing activity. And number two, the weight for those oil items such as gasolines and diesel for the CPI have increased, significantly. So in other words, if we cannot control these prices in the gasoline or diesel, the government objective to keep the price level, around 2% is almost impossible. So there are very tight to read the strict and very significant reasons for the government to keep, take control of those issues. So the government wants to extend their oil tax cut to the end of next month. Well, as you know, the oil tax cuts have been started early last year through originally to the end of last month. But, the oil prices have been very unstable, so they extended the oil tax cuts 2 months more. So now still we have the gasoline tax cut by 25% and diesel tax cut by 37%. Well, for the next couple of months, these tax cuts will be effective. The problem is, since May, if these tax cuts are, dismissed, then our oil prices will increase far higher, up to 1,801. And everyone knows that 2 years ago, when the Dubai prices increased to $117, our retail gasoline prices increased to over 2,000 won per liter. So yes, we don't have any control over the, production reduction in the OPEC plus, but the government will have tons of, significant headaches because they don't have any control over these oil prices. But let's see what happens in the next couple of months.
Right, and then staying with the same question, then, Professor Shim, what are your prospects with regard to the future course of fuel costs?
Oh, well, I'm not sure about the future path of oil prices, or I can say that there is high uncertainty on the future path of oil prices, because there are at least 3 factors that I can imagine that can affect oil prices in different directions. First, geographical risk around the world, including the Israel-Hamas war, Ukraine-Russia war, and tension between China and Taiwan, all can increase oil prices. In particular, the Israel-Hamas war can be a threat on the oil price hike. If the war is escalated to the entire Middle East, while it has not yet been realized so, it can be an important factor on the oil price because it can create oil supply disruptions. However, it seems that the first channel is not that strong as we have experienced during the last 2 years, mainly due to low dependency on the fossil fuel these days. Second, who will win the US presidential election also matters. If the former president Donald Trump wins, he is believed to put less efforts to use clean energy, which can increase demand for oil and hence oil price can hike. If the current president, Joe Biden, is re-elected, the opposite policy would be enhanced. So this raises another uncertainty on the oil prices, which can potentially raise the oil price or lower the price. And the last factor is the state of the world economy. It seems that the world economic outlook is not that optimistic this year because of the prolonged tightened monetary policy can still have negative effects, indicating that the demand for oil would have become low over time, and the decreased demand can lower oil prices. So altogether, which channel dominates the other channel will matter for the future path of the oil prices.
Right, and amid this gloomy picture that Professor Shim has just drawn for us, Professor Yang, I understand this is a tough question, but when can we expect to see an ease in grocery bills, do you think?
Well, as I mentioned, it's hard to tell, but this problem cannot be resolved until we have a new harvest. As the Minister of the Agriculture and the Livestock and Seafood Ministry, she mentioned that we may not have price stability until we have new harvest. So everyone seems to agree on this issue because unless you increase the import from the other countries, which is almost very hard, because otherwise, our domestic fishermen and the farmers will be really upset because they may believe the Korean government do not protect their the turf. So Korean government cannot increase the import of this fish fruit at discretion. So it takes for a while until we have a new harvest to calm down these prices. But if we have a serious problem, in other words, if the pears and apples are two major fundamental fruits in our country, we have a big harvest in the fall, but we have also a big event, the holidays in Chuseok in September. So until then, we have to calm down these prices. Otherwise, all the people really upset. So Korean government may spend a lot of fund to calm down these prices, but let's see what happens. But the major solution to calm down these prices is we've got to have new harvest because an abrupt increase of the import from foreign countries is really hard in terms of the potential political tensions against the farmers and agricultural people.
Right, which is, of course, something that you mentioned earlier as well. Professor Shim, you spoke about monetary policy, and keeping that in mind, what are the implications of high food prices here in the country on prospects of an interest rate cut by the Bank of Korea, do you think?
Given that food is used as inputs to many items that we consume that can affect the overall price level, I think the BOK should take a cautionary step to slash the interest rate. Let me first give you some numbers. When computing the inflation rate, different weights are assigned to different items, and items with greater weights will affect the inflation rate more than the items with lower weights. Let me compare food and electricity, two important items that we have focused on. Food and grocery items are assigned about 130 as the weight, while the weight on electricity is about 30. So this implies that the hike in food prices will have sizable impacts on the future inflation rate, given that it is assigned a high weight. In addition, because it takes some time for the food price, especially fruit prices, to be stabilized, as Professor Yang has pointed out several times, it will make the BOK to hesitate to cut the interest rate very soon. The main reason is that food is not immediately produced as you want to be supplied to the market, and it is not storable for a long time. For example, it takes several months for new apples to come out because it takes some time to harvest. So I think the supply shortage issue will not be that easily solved, implying that the BOK cannot lower the interest rate very soon because the high inflationary, the possibility that inflation rate can increase again is there.
Right. Well, high interest rates themselves, Professor Yang, they are a great burden on households with debt. And the Korea Economic Research Institute has said that private debt will play a crucial part in determining Korea's economic growth this year, which it claims stands at 2%. What are your thoughts?
Well, the private debt is a very serious problem in our economy because now the private debts, combining the household debt and the corporate debt, is the bigger than GDP by almost 227%. In other words, our private debt is more than 2 times bigger than our GDP. And the problem, most serious problem, is a trend on this private debt. It has increased very abruptly and significantly recently. So as of the third quarter last year, the credit to GDP gap, that means about the divergence from the general trend over the ratio, private debt ratio over GDP is over 10%. I mean, this number, in other words, the bigger number than 10% means our private debt has increased, abruptly, very recently. And there are only a couple of countries in the world that have the credit GDP bigger than 10%, which are Japan and Korea. So, and most of the major reasons behind this increase in the private debt is, the households need to prepare in the real estate, and the corporate, they really had to struggle in the COVID-19 period. So most of this problem lies in the corporate debt. Their debt ratio is over 125%. In other words, 25% bigger than the GDP, whereas the household debt some have decreased, in the last couple of quarters. So unless we hold a very tight control over this, particularly the corporate debt, our economy will, because corporate debt is really intertwined with each other, with other companies as well. So Korean government, particularly the financial service, need to be very flexible to support all these debt issues, corporate debt issues. Otherwise, this serious debt level will impact on the other companies like the value chain. So this is a very serious problem.
Right then, Professor Shim, aside from private and corporate debt, if I were to ask you to pick one other factor that looks to greatly affect Korea's economic growth this year, what would you highlight? One factor.
So if I need to pick just one factor, I would say the state of the world economy, because Korea is an economy that heavily depends on export, and export really depends on the state of the world economy. And as I have already pointed out, it seems that woes on the global economy have not yet resolved. The interest rate is still high in most of the countries, including advanced economies, because there are still the remaining concerns for high inflation rate. In addition, it is likely that most of the countries expecting elections this year will experience fiscal expansions, which can potentially be another threat for the inflation rate. So that's what I think is important for Korea's expansion.
Right, I see. Professor Yang, we have like about 1 minute to go. If I were to ask you whether or not recession is well behind us right now, what would you say, Professor Yang?
Well, there are many economic indicators that we are moving toward the recession. For example, the insurance terms and conditional loans has expanded to over $70 billion. I mean, this loan means that people come to loan more money from insurance companies up to the limits of their insurance surrender refund. In other words, they don't have enough liquidity to pay for the insurances, so they loan money from the insurance companies. And besides, about 1/3 of the debtors from insurance firms also borrowed more loan from the financial companies. So all these numbers very strongly imply that our private sectors, particularly the households, have serious problems in the liquidity and financial problems. So yes, we also have the big problems in the liquidity in the construction sectors that has a critical, very significant weight in our overall GDP level. So Korean government and this tries to lower the interest rate for the sake of the economic growth. But again, we have inflation problems. So they have some kind of dilemma. And let's see what happens if FED in the United States lowers the interest rates in the next couple of months. I mean, yeah, these are very serious problems and very big dilemma from the standpoint of the government.
Right. Well, for the time being, there's a lot of uncertainty out there, so we'll have to wait and see what time will tell us. All right, Professor Yang, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. And Professor Shim, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Well, that is all the time we have for this edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.